welcome to Policy Drivers. Today we are talking with Monica Guzman, the Policy Director for Go Austin, Vamos Austin, or GAVA. She focuses on targeting issues that communities want and working closely with them to provide in-person outreach and realization of goals through research and evaluation of public policy. Monica is a native Austinite, passionate about public education, housing affordability, Latinx community health, social service systems, and domestic violence, and serves on the Caritas of Austin Board of Directors. Monica earned a BA in political science from St. Edward's University and her MA in human sciences in sociology and education from Our Lady of the Lake University. Her focus within GAVA is building up a coalition in North Austin, leading and coordinating GAVA's policy team, and keeping up with transportation and mobility issues and police community interactions. Hi, Monica, how are you today?
Doing good, thank you.
So I've done a sort of short introduction for you, but if there's anything I'd missed or anything you want to add, I'd love if you could introduce yourself and kind of tell how you got involved with GAVA and how you got to this point.
Okay, well, thank you. I actually had to think about that question. My journey into public policy probably began as an undergrad, maybe even high school. I majored in and graduated with a BA in political science, like you said. I had thought about law school, specifically constitutional law, which is all about policy. It's about rights established based on state and federal constitutions. After graduate school, I took a position as a policy analyst in a state agency. Since leaving the state in 2010, I've addressed resident rights at a Texas Department of Housing Community Affairs that they inspect LIHTC or tax credit properties. I've testified before council, school board, and community commissioners about community issues. My part as a Caritas board member includes serving in the governance committee, which is a perfect fit for me since it's about policy. And since January 2020, I am the policy director at GAVA. As the policy director, I serve as coordinator for the GAVA policy team and steward GAVA's policy platform and agenda as informed by our organizing work with residents, institutional stakeholders, and community members. I'm a leading point of contact for external stakeholders seeking information about our advocacy positions, and I bring pertinent information back to GAVA regarding issues that directly impact people in our neighborhoods of focus.
Awesome. So the first question that I have for you is, what do you wish that someone had told you when you were first getting started in public policy?
You know, I actually thought I'd have an answer for that, and I can't think of anything because I've always known that's heavy duty reading and research. Mm-hmm. I'm an avid reader, or at least I used to be, and I have always been strong in research.
So there haven't been any unexpected parts about being immersed in public policy that you were maybe surprised about?
Surprises, no. It's more, I know that it can mean long meetings sometimes, so not always being prepared for that. That would probably be the only thing. And that's not really the work I do, you know, within the realm of GAVA, but when I'm actually having meetings, that there's sometimes, I guess, like popcorn. You may have a perfectly scheduled day or week, and then something just out of left field by text, which turns your whole schedule upside down. So that may be the only thing, is just be prepared for the unexpected.
So kind of in that same vein, what advice would you give people like myself and the other interns who are going to be entering the field of public policy in the next few months or maybe the next few years? What do you think is some good advice for us?
Know yourself. Be brave. Push the envelope. Learn from your mistakes. It's okay to fall down so long as you get back up. Be open to learning. Identify opportunities to do summer jobs or an internship across the different realms, public, private, and nonprofit. Participate in civic engagement, whether it's a neighborhood association meeting or a council meeting or a state level public hearing. Any opportunity to get out there. I mean, start by watching, just being a spectator, taking notes. And then at some point, you know, be the one up there at the podium, making yourself heard.
So in terms of, trying to reach those goals and do those things that you're saying, what do you think are some skills or knowledge that is important for us to seek out to prepare to do those kinds of things?
Well, again, know yourself, but know the community. Take advantage of opportunities to deepen your knowledge about yourself as well as broaden your view of the world around you. Sign up for Undoing Racism workshops. Take them as often as possible. Get trained as an organizer. Read books, starting with Cold Anger by Mary Beth Rogers. Cold Anger is about empowering a working class community through church-based activism. You don't have to be a church member to learn from it. Knowledge on issues, especially those important to you. There's important hard skills, reading, writing, research, but the most important ones are the soft skills. Your people and social skills, effective communication skills, being reliable, teamwork, leadership, flexibility, because even in one meeting, you may fluctuate between those, critical thinking, problem-solving skills, conflict resolution. A person can be brilliant, the neighborhood go-to, but if they are unable to engage or communicate, then it can and will limit their ability to affect change.
Thank you. Those are some really great things. I'm going to have to watch it back and take some notes. How would you say that working in policy in a nonprofit is different from working in policy in some sort of other role, like on the city council or something like that? And what are some advantages of that and some disadvantages of that?
Well, in a public realm, excuse me, like I said, I work for the state as a policy analyst and in child support. Now, the advantage was I didn't have to know everything about child support policy. I had my area of expertise. I was considered a locate specialist, how to locate the non-custodial parent. And that was both personal experience as a single parent, as well as knowing about how to do the research the law. I had local, state, and federal law bookmark on my computer, but I also had the books within arm's reach. So there comes the reading and the research. Sometimes it's better just to have the book in front of you, especially if you own it. You can mark it up to death with your highlighter and flags and everything. Can't do that as easily on the computer. The disadvantage is, because it's a public agency, is the bureaucratic red tape. And it's very real. It can be very real, and it can be loosened or tightened depending on who's in charge. If you have a supervisor or manager who has your back, then they can loosen it up big time. But if you have someone that's really more concerned about their own back, then it could get very tight, and it can make it very frustrating and challenging to get your work done. In a nonprofit, even nonprofits differ. You don't find many grassroots nonprofits, and GAVA is one of them. We are very different from others. I said at Caritas, the policy I work with as a board member is more about how the board works, not the organization. So as a board member, I'm limited. I'm not allowed to be involved in the day-to-day policy stuff. With GAVA, we're grassroots, and it's not narrow. It's all things policy. Now, I may not be the policy expert on school-related issues, but we have a staff member who is my subject matter expert. So I can go to her, or someone who's an expert on food distribution, park. So they are my go-to on those areas. But I still need to at least have some familiarity so I know who to direct them to or who I need to meet with so that we can have the right plan in place for our organizers and residents. I don't work with the residents directly anymore as I used to. Every now and then I may still work with them directly, but it's very different. But the disadvantages are just trying to balance my schedule, especially since we're shelter in place. Like many people, we find we're putting in more hours than when we were going to an office. My commute to my office is about 30 feet from my bedside, so I don't go very far. So sometimes my day will start earlier and go much longer. It's a matter of knowing, scheduling in those breaks. It's okay to take an hour and a half, 2 hours for lunch. It's okay to take a 30-minute break versus 15. It's just, as policy director, that can be challenging though, especially on council meeting days. My day is based on their schedule. It's at their mercy. So my lunch is when they take lunch, but I usually try to make sure I have snacks around, things like that, so I don't go nuts.
So you've talked about how GAVA is really immersed in grassroots organizing and reaching out to the community directly to talk with them about what they want and what their priorities are. So what do you consider to be the most important skills for doing that kind of coalition building successfully?
Knowing your audience, your soft skills, again, communication and people skills. I know I've got notes here somewhere, but basically it's knowing them, because no one knows the issues better about the community than they do, because that's where they live. That's where they work. Now, you may happen to, if you live in it, then you're part of that, but you're not the only one, because even in a small community, part of a neighborhood, you can have very different realities across the board. So you still are going to rely on them. But the key is not only for yourself having communication skills, people skills, it's also meeting them where they're at. For many of us, we may have a meeting like this in a video, or do things by email or even by text. For some residents, it's a phone call because they don't have a smartphone. They may not even have a cell phone. There's a couple of residents that they still have a landline. So our residents aren't just the ones who have their whole world, in the internet, realm, the digital age. Some are still very much, old-fashioned landline, pencil and paper. So you need to make it comfortable for them. And then for GAVA especially, we have a lot of non-English speakers. So you need to make sure that two-way communication is, secured. If you speak their language that they're comfortable with, that's great. It just makes it that much easier. But if you don't speak Spanish or Pashto or Urdu, whatever the case may be, then you need to make sure that you have an interpreter, someone to translate your materials. Again, it's about meeting them where they're at, not them where you're at. Once you have that two-way communication nailed, then everything else becomes the same. You take the time to get to know them to get to know you, learn about each other, what issues are important to them for their community. You work to establish and nurture a relationship. Those relationships are the foundation for community organizing and for getting real work done, because it's all about the relationship and building trust. Because they don't know you, so you have to make sure they have time to get to know you and trust you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So since you focus so heavily on getting to know the community and building those relationships, grassroots organizing has that whole component that more top-down strategies of policymaking don't have. So what do you think are some of the really important strengths that the community members bring to this process that you don't get if you're not engaged in grassroots organizing?
It's their knowledge of what is needed, their passion. They may not be comfortable advocating before city council yet, but part of the process after that relationship is established is work with them on their leadership skills, train them to self-advocate. You want to speak before council? Okay, you need to write your statement. I'm not going to write it for you, but I will help you with writing it. Tell me exactly how you feel. And I've had some residents, even pretty well-educated, well-connected residents, who they're trying to put it in city speak or even my speak. I'm like, no, this is not my statement. This is not the city's, this is yours. I said, be as plain as you can. I had an undergraduate professor. He said, plain speak, because that's what I would write in. I would write in plain speak. He goes, you shoot from the hip. But that's really important when it comes to self-advocacy, is it needs to be authentic and sincere. And the best way is to speak from the heart. And I have come to find from personal experience, as well as conversations with council members, that's what gets their attention. if you watch their faces, oh, you can't do it on the virtual, but when it was in chambers and you could see them, you could see their faces and how they're reacting to what people are saying. So that's what's most important, is just put it in your own words.
Yeah.
And the resident one said, well, that's not how council member so-and-so says it. I'm like, that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, they're used to hearing the policy person speak all the time, so it's a little bit more jarring and effective to hear people talk about their experiences in their own words. I know you touched on in your answer about how you'll help them get to speaking in front of the chamber. What are some other areas that community members frequently need support from GAVA to accomplish these policy goals of theirs, and how have you found, or what have you found to be the most effective way of providing that support?
It may not be at a council level, not ever, or not yet, like parks. When I was still doing North Austin Community Development, there was a resident who is very much about the parks. She lived right across the street from Quail Creek Park, but she took her kids elsewhere because she felt it wasn't safe enough and she felt it wasn't clean enough. She wondered how often the city cleaned it. Well, once we had an organizer for North Austin on, he and I would both talk with her, and then she went and got others. So she was already a leader at some level. So she found other people that she knew in the community to bring them on board. And we arranged, or I should say, a meeting was arranged with the Parks and Recreation Department director. Normally, we don't go to the department head. We'll find someone in the staff. I just happened to be at a park meeting that was not work related. It was part of the area I lived in at the time. And I talked to the director afterwards. She was there to make a statement. And I said, hey, I just want to follow up, find out what's going on with Quail Creek. I just had some general questions. And she said, if you have residents with questions, you tell me when and where. I will be there. So she offered, she's really cool. That's Kimberly McNeely. So we were able to connect the residents right away, and we did a walk and talk with the department director, walking the park along the big trail, and they were pointing out issues to her. And I and two of the organizers, we were interpreting for her because most of the residents were Spanish speakers. But that's a great opportunity to get them to connect and know how they can get things done. It just varies from one issue to the next. Some may be me finding someone to talk to and then connecting the organizers, or the organizers may already know who it is, so they reach out to the staff to get things done. Everything works differently depending on the issue as well as the community.
Yeah, I think that's a really important part of your work, just from an outsider's point of view, is being able to throw your weight behind some of the more structural stuff that everyday citizens don't necessarily know how to navigate. Like, who do you even talk to if you have concerns about some issue, right? You were talking about this example. What are some victories that you're most proud of, both in terms of your personal involvement or what you've witnessed happen in a community?
Oh my goodness. Well, one is regarding traffic safety at Pleasant Hill Elementary. Two of our organizers were working with the parents because it's right there near William Cannon and South Congress. It's extremely dangerous. Even when the school zone's in effect, cars are speeding through it. If they come in off a side road, they may come into the middle of the zone not knowing it's active. So they worked with the residents as well as the school staff. And then they also had meetings with the city staff who was responsible for the Safe Routes to School program, and then started setting up community meetings for the staff to meet with the residents. They even made the news. I'd have to go find it and share it by email with Jay, but they were out there and did an active, I don't remember what they called it, but they got out there wearing the yellow vests, holding signs, and so that at a certain time of day when it was most dangerous, either in the morning or the afternoon, they're out there holding signs indicating you need to slow down. They even went so far as they went and talked to businesses, and the residents did too, talking to businesses right there along South Congress between the school and William Cannon, and asking them, can you support us in what we're trying to do? And they were willing to put signs up in the windows of their businesses and get out there to support them. That's how you make it work. You start with the community, work with them, find out what's important, and then help them get the help that they need. It's all about, putting them in the center.
So you're really engaged with residents, and I can tell from what you've been saying that they bring a lot of passion to the projects, and a lot of direction to the priorities. But what do you wish some residents were more involved with here, or more in tune with in Austin?
What I wish is that I wish the city was more involved and in tune with the community.
Mm-hmm.
Many in the community are already very much aware, but they may not know how to get to where they need to. So that's where the organizing comes into play. We need to turn the table. It's the city that needs to learn, the county, the school board, whoever that the decision makers are. So again, it's, putting the onus where it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these elected officials and entities are expecting the community to meet them where they're at, whether it's the dais, on a video, and that's not how it works. That's how many people get left out. And I have gone so far, personally speaking before council, to remind them to look at the organizing chart for the city, the org chart. Who sits at the top? We do. The community does. We need to remind them that they answer to us. And that's part of, even without saying it that directly, although I'm the type that will do that. Not necessarily in any official role, but as a private citizen, yes, I will go that far. But no, like I said, it's more about the city being in tune with the community. Now,
Yeah, I agree. I think residents have the wherewithal, and they have the commitment, and they have the passion, but the methods of change need to be more accessible to everyday citizens, because not everyone understands how to make the changes that they want to see, because city government is so insular and complicated, and like you were saying with the org charts, they're crisscrosses everywhere, and you never really know who handles what. So yeah, I'm totally with you. What are some of your short and long-term goals during your time with GAVA, and what are some policies that you would most like to see changed with the city of Austin?
Short and long term. Short term is just to, we have been very fortunate. I mean, I'll boast here, GAVA, we are very cutting edge, moving into digital organizing, which can be challenging for people who lack digital access and digital literacy. So again, it's finding how to connect with them, even if it's just still a phone call. We're able to get things done. We had something recently, I know, on Decibel. They showed one of our residents and a couple of our staff working with Urban Roots on produce distribution. Now that did not come out of the whole pandemic. That was already in our plans. We just added what safety protocols were needed, but still, we know how to, we work around the challenges. We find a way to get around them, push them out of our way, over, through, whatever the case may be. It takes some creative thought process, and at GAVA, everybody has, a say. Sometimes I'll reach out to the organizers and say, I need to hear from you on, X, Y, and Z. I'm focusing on this policy because that's what is, the front burner right now. But you tell me, are the residents, is this what still matters to the residents? If it's not, I need to change that. Or maybe there's something that I can see coming down the road. We're not there yet. GAVA may not focus on it yet, but I think it's going to end up on our plate. So that's something that I bring back to GAVA as a whole, not just the leadership. So it's just a matter of having communication top to bottom within, and then again, working with the community.
And what about your some changes you'd like to see in the city of Austin?
I'd really like them to stop and look in the mirror. I mean, learn from history. I'm sure Jay will remember when he heard me speaking at KLRU almost 3 years ago, that we need to look and learn from our history. I mean, most people go back to the 1928 master plan as the beginning of all things wrong with city government. But actually, what a lot of people don't know is the fact that Austin is even a city. that caused the displacement of indigenous communities.
Mm-hmm.
They were forced off of their land so a city could be built. That is where it began, a very bad decision. I'd like to see them really change their process. Start with the community. Don't plan things and then take it to the community. Don't come into everybody's neighborhood. Oh, I see what's wrong here. Here's what we need to fix it. No, you don't live there. You don't know what's wrong. You don't know that's what they want. Again, it all goes back to being very grassroots, starting with the people that live there. This is a multilingual city. Over 100 languages are spoken in Austin. The Runberg area alone, more than 50. In AISD, roughly 96, last count I heard. The Latinx community makes up almost 40% of the population. We've been at that level for quite some time, and it's only going to continue to grow. When we started getting to that point, even before we hit 40% or whatever, or even 35, the city and other public entities should have already been making materials available in English and Spanish as a rule, as a standard at that point. They're getting better, but residents, community members are still having to ask, when are you going to do this in Spanish? When are you going to put this in the languages that are needed? Okay, sure, you don't need Pashto in Dove Springs, but you need it in Runberg. And constantly reminding them, you need to know your audience. You need to know who you're going out to, and taking the time to do that. That would make things run much more smoothly. There would be a much probably stronger and higher trust level between the community and the city as a whole. The decision makers probably expect respect because of what they do. It's earned. The community deserves it too. They're human beings. They have opinions. They have concerns. They deserve a place at the table, whether it's the podium in chambers, it's a video online, or it's a folding card table in somebody's backyard. It doesn't matter where it's at. If decisions are being made impacting their life, their house, their street, their community, they need to be asked, how do you feel about this?
Thank you very much for your answers. I think that you have a plug-in with the community that I think we need to have more of. And you're completely right about the city of Austin sort of making these decisions before consulting the people who it affects. And we have a long, long history of doing that, that we need to reckon with. I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues to ask you a few questions on some specific policy things, but thank you so much for all of the stuff that you have given us so far.
Absolutely.
You mentioned a bit earlier about work that you did with traffic safety in a school zone. And one of Farm&City's major policy efforts right now is Vision Zero Texas, which is a goal to achieve zero traffic deaths anywhere in Texas. But we obviously have a really long way to go at the moment. So I just wanted to ask, what have you found are some of the most consistent traffic safety issues here in Austin and the communities you work with are concerned about? And what have you found are some of the best ways to address those factors to get us closer to safer streets for everyone to enjoy?
Well, again, the school specifically, I'm familiar with Vision Zero, and David Gray, when he worked on that, he was part of who went to Pleasant Hill Elementary to meet with the residents. Again, regardless of what the issue, it's the community is core. That's where you need to start. What needs to be done is really take the time to talk to the citizens, the residents. I mean, I live up in the Runberg area, so North Lamar. It's basically, well, pre-COVID, you know, it's a highway. It's crazy. I have advocated for more pedestrian hybrid beacons repeatedly. They're finally starting to happen. But even on smaller streets, I'm not sure, like Peyton Gin, for example, it's not a major thoroughfare, but it's not a is it a residential street either? So I'm not really sure. Transportation, I don't know all the terms, but Peyton Gin is busy enough because it connects North Lamar to 183. Either directly to, Peyton Gin all the way to 183 or Olin Road to 183. It can get very busy. You've got students crossing back and forth. Even right now that school is not in, well, when the students had to stay at home and it's summer, people were still going to the campus for walking, play soccer, whatever the case may be. It's dangerous. Now, the neighborhood association was one of the first ones to speak up. And so they already had some ties. But I would rather hear from the ones who are crossing the street every day, all the time. That's who I would want to hear. But there needs to be slower speed limits, which I know they just recently approved. So I can't wait to see how that plays out. It really wasn't clear how that affects North Austin, north of 183. Nothing seemed to fit any definition in the proposal. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out here. We need more pedestrian hybrid beacons, especially on streets that are as big and long and as busy as North Lamar. I know another one is about to go active. I can't remember where in Lamar. I think it's near where Carpenter intersects, or Cooper, excuse me, not Carpenter. Cooper intersects with Lamar. But between Breaker and 183, there probably needs to be at least 4, maybe 6 pedestrian hybrid beacons. There's still a big enough gap between the PHBs and traffic lights that people are cutting across the street without anything. They're just used to that. And I get worried. I've come close myself to hitting people that just suddenly come out of nowhere. And I tend to drive slower on the bigger streets when they get busy. So we really need to focus funding in those, and whether it's Vision Zero, pedestrian safety, or any other issue, any policy issue, we need to be using an upstream process. Don't fix problems, don't focus on the cure. Focus on the prevention. You can pull kids out of the river, but they're still coming in upstream. You need to find a way to keep them from being thrown in or falling in upstream, so you can finally stop pulling them out downstream. And so that's really what it is. To me, it seems pretty simple, common sense. Unfortunately, with the bureaucracy, it doesn't work that way. They need to look at the budget so they can really focus on the upstream measures, because the downstream ones can get very expensive, more cost effective when it's upstream.
Yeah, I think that definitely makes a lot of sense. It usually helps to solve the root cause of a problem rather than trying to worry about addressing the symptoms later.
Yep.
So I think as sort of a follow-up to that, you mentioned that people are still walking a lot and using the streets to go exercise or play in the parks while everything is shut down during COVID right now. So do you think that the fact that maybe more people, or people who might not have been walking around their neighborhoods before, could help build momentum behind efforts to improve pedestrian safety and things? Or is it sort of hard to tell with everything up in the air at the moment?
I think it is. I mean, I think they can always help make changes, positive changes, because it's their voice, their advocacy. Right now, it's hard to tell. I really don't know right now if people are still getting out. I know initially back in late March, early April, when I would go out to do my own walking, I tend to walk around the elementary school I attended. So that's in a different neighborhood. It's just familiar territory. I know which streets I can walk on and there won't be much traffic. So I don't know that people are still getting out to do that. So it may be in flux. I try to stay at home as much as possible for health reasons. Like hopefully everybody does, but I do get out when I go walking. I either walk the property where I live, it's a multifamily, or I go to where I know there's very little people traffic, even on foot, that way to ensure enough safety. So right now, There's a lot in flux, but there still needs to be work on policies ensuring the safety of those who are still out there, whether they're walking for their health or they're out there because they have to be. They have to go to work. They don't have the option to stay home.
Yeah. Well, I think August has our next question, so I'm going to turn it over to him. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so I had a question. There's often a perception that changing infrastructure to improve density and walkability in neighborhoods can encourage displacement and gentrification. To what degree have you seen that to be true in your work? And are there any methods you have found to, offer the improvements to communities without increasing risk of displacement?
Well, first of all, I mean, I know to some people it's a perception. I'm here to tell you it's a reality. It's very much a reality. Just because you increase housing doesn't mean the people who are there already can stay there. Because in order, a lot of places, unfortunately, and this really popped up under Code Next, the Land Development Code rewrite, is that building more doesn't necessarily make it better. It just means you're building more. You could build a huge complex down the street from where I live, but what's going to have to be torn down to make it possible? So for every house you remove to put in, for example, a duplex that's affordable, it's still going to cost more than the house did that was there before it. So are you really making it affordable? No, not necessarily. It's like with many things, is who is it being built for? Is it being built for the people who live there now, or the people who are going to be moving in from, whether it's another part of town or another city altogether, another state? And that goes back to, again, they're making plans without talking to the community. If you want to make sure there's more housing, then find ways to do it. Public-private partnerships, private nonprofit partnerships. Think East, which I don't know all the details. It's been a while since I've read on that, but that's a really good example. You get the community involved, make meetings accessible to them, and find a way to make it happen. There's a lot of public property. It's owned from local to state, but it's not being used. Well, why not turn that into housing that's affordable? And I'm trying to really be active. Affordable housing is a catch term still, because it's, again, affordable for who? This should be more about housing affordability. And yes, we want neighborhoods that are walkable, people to be able to get out, whether they're walking or biking. But again, once you do that, you're changing the structure. So I'm trying to think of something else here, an actual example. I may not be able to give you a specific community, but more often than not, changing the way the community looks in terms of housing for more homes is more than likely going to tip the gentrification needle. There's also the property tax issue. Is you build something new, it's going to affect the property tax of the people that live adjacent to the property. I've heard many elected officials say, oh, no, it's not going to change. It's only going, no, it's going to change. It's just a matter of whether or not you can still afford to live there. I will never forget hearing about, oh, we'll build an ADU, granny flat, whatever you want to call it, that you can make more money that way. Do you know that a person has to have an income of over $100,000, take home, net, over $100,000 to be able to build an accessory dwelling unit in their backyard, build it and maintain it? Because you may not always have a renter, but you still got a mortgage to pay on it. So like I said, that's not a solution meant for everyone. So the biggest change, and I know I probably seem like I'm all over the place with this, but the biggest thing, it's all about the process, not any specific policy. It's about the process of how the policies are made or are changed. The work must be done through an equity lens, and you need to involve the community. I'm gonna go back because I know Code Next was on y'all's list, and Land Development Code. is they put the cart before the horse. They were planning the community without engaging the community. So if you want to plan a community, the community needs to be part of the planning. You also don't have to revamp the entire thing. Go back to small neighborhood planning, whether you want to call it the approved neighborhood plans or just small neighborhood. You start in a small community, engage the community, get to know them. What changes do you want to see? We know that you've talked about not being able to afford to live here. What do you think is needed? Find ways, work with the community so that they can stay there. Because otherwise, all the work in the end is meant for somebody else. They don't benefit from it, somebody else
does. I don't know if we have a lot of time to dig into that more, but I just quickly wanted to say that I think, especially here in Austin, it's not just about building more housing, it's where we're planning to build it. And I think, you know, in Austin, all of our conversations so far about land development code and adding more units, more housing, it's sort of assumed that all of that building is happening on the east side, and the people on the west side have pushed back against adding any density there. I mean, I don't know why we're not talking more about building apartments along Duval, where there's already a 15-minute frequent service bus, you know? So I think Austin does need more housing. People are going to continue to move here, but where are we putting them? Whose voice matters more in this discussion? So yeah, I think definitely a good point, talking to communities about what it is that they want, but the way that we talk to communities in East Austin is going to look different than the way we talk to communities in West Austin, who have typically held, you know, way more sway in our city's development. So
does. And that is true. I mean, it's a hard issue. We do need more housing. No one's going to deny that. We need more housing, whether it's single family or an apartment complex, wherever the case may be. The question is, and then transportation, one thing I remember from several years ago when I ran for council in 2014, and I was pretty much a one-woman show. I was the candidate, the campaign manager, the everything. I didn't have a team or anything. I had barely a shoestring budget. But one thing that kept popping up is, well, we're going to do housing over here. Well, but people need public transportation. And it was like the chicken and the egg. Which comes in first? Well, Capital Metro is not going to put anything in until there's housing, but right. You don't want to put housing in unless you know the transportation's already there. Right. You go back and forth. And also, as far as East versus West, in general, yes, very different conversations, but there really is no East and West Austin anymore. It's now the Eastern Crescent, because as people were pushed out, were displaced from what was the original Central East Austin, they went to the north, like Pflugerville. They went farther east, Manor. They went south, Dove Springs. And then over time, it started to bend or arc coming west of the interstate. So actually, like I said, that's why I'm not as vocal about it as I used to be, really pushing it, but I'll do it when I need to. It's now Austin's Eastern Crescent and everybody else. Because there are people in West Austin who are not wealthy, you know, own homes. I mean, we know good and well that people who have these huge mansions and stuff, they have household staff, and odds are household staff is going to need to live near them. So otherwise they got a big transportation issue. Well, there needs to be housing available for them that they can afford based on what they're doing. So it needs to be citywide. There are people who have money who live east of the interstate. There are people who don't, who are west of Mopac. So we need to find something that's equitable, so it works across the board, putting more money where the need is greater.
You know, I'll jump in. There's an opportunity to, I think, kind of meet that we could really maybe come together on, specifically on the small area planning concept, and that basically the Project Connect plan and the light rail plan, if it all goes well and we get this great transit system, that's going to really change neighborhoods. And so it seems there's, on both sides of the Code Next debate, from council and the mayor's office, there's interest in sort of putting money into small area planning along the sort of in the transit oriented areas. And so I'm hoping that this year in the budget process, we can push for that and push for some money to start doing equitable community-based planning for, but assuming that when we build that light rail, a lot of people are going to want to live there. And so what do we do about it? And how do we have the communities there plan it? So that's an interesting one where we all could work. Like, I think we have very strong shared interests that the city should have better planning processes and start planning for that growth.
Yes.
So.
And since you mentioned Project Connect,
yeah.
as a private citizen, I totally support multimodal transportation. I'm totally behind that. GAVA, we support an active and connected transportation, but we are also at the same time, we're concerned about the lack of community engagement. I have been to many Project Connect meetings in my neighborhood, Capital Metro office, other places, and more often than not, the audience lacks diversity. I am concerned because in the meetings I have attended with residents or even one-on-one conversations talking about transportation, it's not about Project Connect. It's not about the rail. It's about how am I supposed to get to my doctor's appointment because they got rid of this bus route. Or they changed the route, so now I need to take 2 other buses to get to it. You need to make sure their needs are met. That doesn't mean you can't do the rail or Project Connect, but you have to basically, again, always goes back, meet them where they're at. What are their needs? They may be more supportive, you don't know, but they have their own needs. I remember one community where people, they either went to see a doctor at the, what's it called? It now belongs to, I think, St. David's, the North Austin Medical over on Mopac near Parmer. When they removed the route, they were told, oh, well, just go to Seton Northwest or downtown to Delmet or whatever. And they're like, but my doctor's over here. And some people in the community also work at North Austin Medical. So how are they supposed to get to their jobs when you eliminated the only way they have to get there? So again, it's a mixed bag. Things would be a lot better if you start with the community. Start with the community, lead with the community. You'll do much better.
I have another idea to throw in if nobody else is jumping on. There is basically right now there will be a big public discussion of funding transit. And I think the people of Austin need a lot more transit, but then they're still going to have to actually plan all these light rail lines and better bus lines. And we've been looking really specifically at all the maps of North Lamar between 183 and I-35. They don't have enough dots, and like they're basically not planning. They're planning on there being less stops than the 801 has now, on the north side, which I think is a crazy bad idea. And so that official process will start after the vote in November. And I think we need to make sure people on the north side know about it and can be engaged and can be saying, like, you have to have a stop at Runberg and you have to have a stop at where the big Asian market is and stuff. So it's something to keep an eye on because I mean the way the maps look now, it looks like what they're saying is we want to get through the north side real fast so that the suburban commuter from Tech Ridge can get to downtown as fast as possible. Whereas I think having those stops on the north side is maybe more important than how fast it is to get all the way through. So.
No, that makes sense, but not only the more stops, but the frequency. When they made changes, they cut back on the frequency on at least one line going to the Runberg area with the heaviest or near heaviest ridership. Yet in other parts of Austin where very little ridership, yet they gave them increased frequency. That doesn't make sense. Why would you make buses come through more often in a neighborhood that doesn't really need it or use it, but you cut back on the ones that do? It doesn't make any sense.
Well, are you pulling us together, Tynan? Is that all the question?
Yeah, I think we have one more question from Olivia. She wanted to talk a little bit more about the Spanish and English bilingual programming and a few other points on that.
Yeah, I also just wanted to be really respectful of your time, because I don't want to feel like we're encroaching on other meetings you have today, but it's been really, really interesting talking with you, and I would just love to hear your thoughts on this specific thing, because we talked a lot today about equity and really involving the community, and how the city doesn't communicate with the various communities that are within the city. Nothing is really going to get done that benefits the communities that need it the most. And unfortunately, a big nationwide problem, not just statewide, is this kind of barrier to building relationships via languages. And a lot of the times people are looked down upon if they don't speak English, and that's really unfortunate and should not be the case. And so in Texas, where there are a lot of English and Spanish speakers and other languages like we've discussed today, and so I kind of want to know, what do you think has to happen in order to create more comprehensive bilingual programming for English and Spanish, but then other languages as well?
Well, you know, as you said, and I've already pointed out, they need to put certain things in place. Anything that goes out, whether it's a piece of paper in the mail, an email, something on Facebook, the website, it should automatically be in English and Spanish. It shouldn't be English, oh, Spanish is coming later, if at all. Or it shouldn't be English, if you need something else, let us know. It should already be coming out both. Participation in meetings, council meetings, even boards and commissions, there should already be interpreters in place. Shouldn't have to ask for them. As it is with city council meetings, and I don't know if you're aware of this, I mean, it's bad enough that there's not much of a registration time. Council meetings on Thursday, usually the earliest you're going to be able to sign up to speak is Monday of that same week. People cannot request an interpreter prior to that. You have to register to speak first. Well, that's a tight turnaround. And when I'm sitting here trying to anticipate when are they going to have it, when are they going to have it, then I can tell our organizers so they can tell the residents. And not everybody can turn on a dime. Not everybody can drop everything at the last minute and suddenly get online and do all this. Our organizers work with them and help them on it, walk them through it. So it's just a very unfair and unforgiving process. They need to make it easier. I understand people can't register to speak on something if they don't know what's on the agenda. But why not let people request an interpreter way ahead of time? I know there's a meeting on August 27, 2020. Can I go ahead and get my name on the list for, you know, requesting interpretation, whether it's the 2 days before, 2 months before? But what's even better is already have the interpreters there so we don't have to request it. From what I recall, it feels like it's forever ago, being in chambers, they always had the Spanish interpreters on hand already. We didn't have to request them. Why can't they do that for the virtual meetings? Why does it have to become a challenge just because they're moving to virtual? And then being better about having bilingual staff. I've worked for the city only once. It was as a temporary in the Austin Code Department. And even though I may not be fluent in Spanish, but I know enough that it could be conversational. I was not allowed to do certain communication because I was not considered officially bilingual staff. You had to have a certain status. And I'm like, seriously? It's like, I know Spanish well enough to write something in Spanish. And so I was having to call around trying to figure out, okay, who on staff in the entire city of Austin government can help me with this? I called what they call corporate CPIO, the Communications and Public Information Office. And they said, oh, well, you need to go through your department. I said, well, it was my department that told me to go to you. So even within the departments, they have no idea what the resources are within the city. That's pretty sad. I remember speaking before a a committee, the Audit and Finance Committee, about it. So for language access, $2 million every year available to make information available in other languages. And I have no exact number, but I'm willing to bet, based on my experience, more than half the city didn't even know about it. And then having quality interpreters. They have to be registered vendors. I know some personally. I always recommend them. I've come to find out they're not being called upon anymore. Somebody else is, who is registered, but the quality, just because someone's a certified interpreter doesn't necessarily mean that they're a good one. That's a skill you have to be trained in, practice in. So again, you know, it's on the city to make sure they have everything they need to make it easier for the community. So everything standard English and Spanish from the get-go. Have interpreters already in place so no one has to request them. Now, if it's a language that only 5 people out of the entire city speak, then yeah, I get it. Not everybody speaks Klingon. You should have to request that. But if it's a relatively common language, there's no reason they shouldn't be doing it already as a regular thing. So that's the big one. Not only for programming, and you know, once they do that, then everything comes much easier. It's already second nature. They know they need to do things. As far as programming, like through Park and Rec and Austin Public Housing, contracting with people who are bilingual, bringing in instructors who are bilingual. So that's the main thing. It all goes back to what I've been saying over and over again. Know your audience, know the community, meet them where they're at.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I probably sound like a broken record, but until it happens, I'm going to keep saying it.
Well, thank you very much for all of your comments. And do we have any other questions or comments from others on the call? I don't think so. Okay, well, we don't want to take up any more of your time. Thank you so much for all of your comments and answers to our questions today. You've given us a lot of really wonderful insight, and I know we're all really interested to learn more about GAVA. So thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much, Monica.
You bet.